My Navy SEAL brother-in-law called me just a nurse. Then his old commander recognized my medal. The night my brother-in-law called me just a nurse, he was standing on a hotel stage, smiling under a chandelier, while 3 cameras recorded every word. I was near the back of the ballroom, handing out water bottles because he had told the volunteers I was best used somewhere simple. Then a retired Navy captain walked in, saw the tiny silver ribbon pinned inside my jacket, and stopped like he had seen a ghost. My brother-in-law, Troy Lennox, tried to laugh it off. "Captain Mercer," he said, "that's just my sister-in-law, Evelyn. She's an ER nurse." The captain did not look at him. He looked at me. Then he said, in front of donors, reporters, board members, my sister, my mother, and every person who had spent years thinking I was harmless, "Lieutenant Commander Hart?" The room went silent. Troy's smile stayed on his face, but everything behind it changed. Captain Mercer stepped closer and looked at the ribbon again. "My God," he said, "that medal is yours?" By midnight, Troy would accuse me of ruining his charity gala. By Monday, I would be suspended from my hospital. By the end of the month, my sister would call me from a motel room, whispering that Troy had used her login to move charity money into another woman's company. And by the time the truth finally came out, the man who called me just a nurse would learn something every battlefield nurse already knows. The person holding the water may be the only reason anyone in the room survives. My name is Evelyn Hart. Most people call me Evie. At 42, I had a life that looked small from the outside. I worked night shifts in the emergency department at St. Catherine's Hospital. I packed my daughter Sophie's lunch before school. I checked my mother's blood pressure every Sunday. I showed up early to family gatherings and stayed late to clean up. To my family, I was dependable, quiet, useful, and not particularly impressive. My younger sister, Beth, was the impressive one. Beth had the kind of beauty people called soft, because they did not understand how much work went into it. Blonde hair, careful makeup, a voice that trembled at the perfect moment. She was not cruel. That was what made everything harder. Beth did not mean to hurt people. She simply preferred the version of the world where she never had to choose between comfort and truth. Then she married Troy Lennox. Troy was a former Navy SEAL. He said it calmly, but he made sure everyone knew. It was in the way he stood, the way he shook hands, the way he corrected men twice his age on discipline, leadership, sacrifice, brotherhood, pain, weakness, courage, and what he liked to call real service. At first, I tried to like him. He fixed my mother's porch railing. The first summer he joined the family. He carried grocery bags without being asked. He made Beth laugh in a way I had not heard since we were girls. Then one Thanksgiving, someone asked me about my time in the Navy. "Nurse Corps," I said. Troy's expression changed by one tiny degree. "Oh," he said, "medical." Beth smiled quickly. "That's still Navy, Troy." I didn't say it wasn't. He lifted both hands. "We love nurses. We." Like I had been placed in a category. My mother tried to smooth it over. "Evie served for years." Troy nodded. "Hospitals don't run themselves." Everyone laughed softly, because it did not sound mean enough to challenge. So I let it pass. That was my first mistake. Not because one comment matters, but because comments like that are seeds. If you never pull them out, they become the garden everyone walks through. Over the next 5 years, Troy turned me into a family joke without ever sounding openly cruel. If someone cut their finger at dinner, he would call, "Doc Hart, you're up." If I carried a tray of food, he would say, "That's our combat medic." If military service came up, he would glance at me and say, "No offense, Evie, but there's a difference between being near the fight and being in it." Then came the nickname, "Just a Nurse." He said it lightly, always with a smile, always in a room where correcting him would make me look dramatic. And I let it happen. I had reasons. Some were real, some were excuses. There were parts of my military service I could not discuss. I had served as a Navy trauma nurse, attached to special operations medical teams. I had worked in places that did not appear in family newsletters. I had learned how to stop bleeding in rooms where the lights flickered and men prayed to mothers they would never see again. I had also received a Silver Star for actions during a mass casualty evacuation overseas. That part was public, but I never talked about it. Not to Beth, not to Mom, not even to Sophie, my 12-year-old daughter. I told myself I was being humble. The truth was uglier. I was tired. I had spent years being needed in the loudest, bloodiest, most desperate moments of strangers' lives. When I came home, I wanted one place where nobody asked me to be brave. If my family wanted me to be the quiet nurse who brought salad and checked prescriptions, I let them. At first, being underestimated felt like rest. Then, it became a cage. Troy built his nonprofit 3 years after marrying Beth. Trident House was supposed to help veterans transition into civilian life. Counseling vouchers, housing assistance, job training, peer groups. In the beginning, it even did some good, which is why so many people believed in it. Troy was excellent on stage. He knew how to talk about invisible wounds. He knew when to lower his voice. He knew how to pause before saying the name of a dead friend. Donors trusted him because he looked like the kind of man who had suffered nobly and returned stronger. Beth handled events: flowers, seating charts, thank you cards, silent auction baskets, donor calls. She called it our mission, and I never knew whether she meant the charity or her marriage. Then there was Violet Carr. Violet was Trident House's communications director. She was younger than Beth, sharper than Beth, and much more dangerous because she never looked like she was trying. She had soft brown curls, pale skin, and a calm voice that could turn an accusation into a prayer. She almost never attacked directly, she suggested. She worried. She asked whether someone was okay. She sent follow-up messages that began with, "I just want to make sure we're protecting everyone." People thought Violet was kind because she spoke gently. I knew nurses like her. Not many, but enough. People who speak softly while moving knives are not less dangerous. They only make less noise. I helped Trident House because Beth asked me to. I reviewed medical wording on grant applications. I connected them with 2 counselors I trusted. I covered small things when Beth said cash flow was tight. Nobody knew. That was how I operated. Quiet help, quiet work, quiet resentment. The gala was supposed to be Troy's breakthrough. Trident House had been shortlisted for a county-backed veterans wellness grant worth $2 million over 3 years. The final decision had not been made yet, but the gala would put Troy in front of donors, city officials, hospital executives, board members, and the one endorsement he wanted most: Captain Elias Mercer. Mercer was a retired Navy captain with real credibility. Troy called him my old commander, though I later learned they had only overlapped briefly overseas. Still, Troy admired him. Or maybe he admired the usefulness of being admired by him. 2 weeks before the gala, Troy came to Beth's kitchen while I was helping Mom organize her medications. "Evie," he said, "I need you at the wellness table that night." Wellness table? Water, aspirin, Band-Aids, basic stuff. Nurse things. Beth gave me an apologetic look. It would really help. "Of course," I said. Troy smiled. "And Evie?" "Yes? Let's keep the night focused. No confusing people with old service stories." "I don't tell service stories." "Exactly," he said. "That's what I appreciate about you." He meant it as praise. That was how good he was. On the evening of the gala, I almost did not wear the medal pin. It was a miniature silver star ribbon, small enough to hide inside my jacket lapel. I had found it that morning while looking through an old cedar box in my closet. It sat there among old Navy papers, discharge documents, photos, and letters I had never answered, because gratitude can sometimes feel heavier than blame. Sophie appeared in my bedroom doorway with a bowl of cereal. "What's that?" "Something from the Navy." "Is it yours?" "Yes." "Why don't you wear it?" I closed my fingers around it. "I don't know." She tilted her head. "Is it because you don't want people to ask questions?" I looked at my daughter and realized she had been watching me more closely than I knew. Maybe. That seems lonely. Children can cut you open without meaning to. So I wore the pin. Not outside the jacket, not like an announcement, just inside the fold. A private truth. The gala was held at the Harrington Hotel ballroom. Marble floors, gold lights, huge flower arrangements, and enough polished smiles to power a political campaign. Violet found me near the entrance. "Evie," she said. "Thank God. The wellness station is this way." She led me to a folding table near a service hallway. On it were 2 cases of water, a plastic bin of supplies, and a sign that said wellness support. I opened the bin. There were bandages, antacids, aspirin, cheap instant cold packs, and glucose tablets that had expired the year before. There was no blood pressure cuff, No pulse oximeter, no alcohol-free wipes, and no written emergency plan. It was the kind of medical station people create when they want the appearance of safety without the discipline of it. I picked up the glucose tablets. Who packed this? Violet looked over my shoulder. Is something wrong? These are expired. Her expression did not change much. That was what I noticed later. At the time, I only saw her blink. Oh, she said. Troy said the supplies were handled. By whom? Volunteer logistics, I think. I took a photo of the bottle. Violet watched me do it. Do you need to document everything? I'm a nurse, she smiled. Of course. I went to a pharmacy down the block and bought proper supplies with my own card. Glucose tablets, sealed juice boxes, instant cold packs, alcohol wipes, protein bars, electrolyte packets, and a cheap digital thermometer. It was not a trauma kit, but at least it was no longer theater. When I returned, Violet was speaking to Malcolm Pierce's wife near the silent auction table. Malcolm was one of the largest donors in the room. The two women stopped when they saw me. Everything okay? I asked. Violet smiled. Perfect. That word would come back later. Perfect. The incident happened at 7:16 p.m. Malcolm Pierce approached the wellness table, sweating through his collar. His hands had a small tremor, and his smile was too loose. My wife said you're medical, he said. I'm diabetic. I think I messed up with the champagne. I guided him behind a decorative partition near the service hall, away from the ballroom. Do you have your meter? In my jacket. Any chest pain? Trouble breathing? Slurred speech? No. Just shaky. Insulin tonight. Long acting this morning. Nothing since lunch. He checked his blood sugar with his own meter. Low, but not catastrophic. I followed the rule every nurse knows. Fast sugar first, then recheck. Then something with protein, so the number does not crash again. I gave him juice, had him sit, asked a bartender for cheese and crackers, and kept him talking while I watched his color, speech, and hands. That was all. No drama, no speech, no heroic music, just a nurse doing nurse work. When his number came back up, and the tremor eased, Malcolm squeezed my hand. You saved me from making a fool of myself. You helped yourself by saying something early, I said. Eat before the next toast. He laughed. Yes, ma'am. 10 minutes later, Violet appeared beside me. Evie, she said softly. Malcolm's wife is upset. About what? She feels he was embarrassed. I treated him privately. I know. I told her you meant well. There it was. Not you helped. Not she misunderstood. You meant well. A phrase that sounds kind until you realize it has already declared you guilty. By 8 p.m., I heard the rumor in fragments. Evie made a donor look drunk. Evie overstepped. Evie likes being needed. Evie brought attention to herself. Then Troy took the stage. He looked perfect up there. Dark suit. Open collar. American flag behind him. Beth glowing beside the stage like a proud campaign wife. He spoke about service, brotherhood, sacrifice, coming home, and the kind of pain men carry silently. Then he said, and tonight, we thank every kind of helper. Therapists, spouses, nurses, volunteers. Even those who never carried the heavy things still carried something. People clapped. His eyes found mine near the back. He smiled. Sometimes support matters too. Support. A few people looked at me kindly, as if I had been honored. I felt the old cage close. Then Captain Mercer entered. He was late. Tall, white-haired, moving with the controlled stiffness of a man whose body had filed complaints, but whose mind still outranked all of them. Troy saw him immediately and crossed the ballroom fast. Captain Mercer, Troy said warmly. Sir, I can't tell you what it means to have you here. Mercer shook his hand. Lennox. Only that. Not Troy. Not good to see you. Lennox. I noticed because old habits never leave. A person's silence can carry more information than their words. Troy began introducing him to donors. Then Malcolm Pierce, still pale but recovered, pointed toward me. That's the nurse who helped me, he said. Good woman. Mercer turned. His eyes moved over my face politely, then dropped to the inside of my lapel. The silver ribbon caught light when I shifted. His expression changed. He walked toward me. Troy followed. Captain, this is my sister-in-law, Evelyn Hart, ER nurse. Former Navy medical, but mostly hospital side. Mercer did not look at him. Lieutenant Commander Hart? The room went quiet around us in widening circles. Troy laughed once. Common mistake, sir. Evie was Navy, but... Mercer raised one hand. Troy stopped talking. Ma'am, Mercer said. Is that yours? I could have lied. I almost did. I had spent years lying by omission, and I was very good at it. But Sophie's voice moved through my head. That seems lonely. Yes, sir, I said. Mercer's jaw tightened. I was in the operations center when the medevac call came through. I read the report before half of it disappeared into black ink. I never knew your face. Troy's face had gone still. What report? He asked. Mercer finally looked at him. The one with her name on it. A photographer lowered his camera. Beth had one hand over her mouth. Violet stood near the silent auction table, watching without blinking. Mercer turned back to me. I've wanted to shake your hand for a long time. I did not want the room. I did not want the cameras. I did not want my mother staring as if I had become a stranger. But Mercer was offering respect in public, and refusing it would have been another kind of hiding. So I shook his hand. He held mine firmly. Thank you, Commander. The room applauded. Because rooms do not know what else to do when truth interrupts the program. Troy clapped too. That was how I knew he had already decided to punish me. After the gala, I tried to leave through the service hallway. Troy caught me near the coat check. Beth was behind him. Violet stood a few feet away, close enough to witness, far enough to deny listening. Troy's smile was gone. You set me up. By handing out water? You wore that medal. That medal is mine. You knew Mercer would be here. You invited him. You knew he'd recognize it. I didn't know he had read the report. Beth whispered. Evie, why didn't you tell us? I looked at my sister. You never asked. That's not fair. No, I said. It isn't. Troy stepped closer. You embarrassed me at my own event. You embarrassed yourself by speaking about things you did not understand. His eyes hardened. You know what your problem is? You pretend to be humble, but you wanted that moment. I put on my coat. My problem is that I let you call me small for 5 years, because correcting you felt exhausting. Beth flinched. Violet said softly, Maybe this isn't the place. I turned to her. You're right. It never is, somehow. Then I left. The first clip appeared the next morning. 7 seconds. Troy saying, even those who never carried the heavy things still carried something. Then Mercer shaking my hand. Then my face, unsmiling. The caption read, Awkward moment at Veterans Gala, when nurse sister-in-law upstages founder. By noon, Trident House released a statement. Last night's event was meant to honor veterans and their families. We are saddened that a private matter distracted from the mission. Private matter. Distracted. Violet had written it. I could feel her fingerprints on every soft word. By Monday morning, my hospital administrator called me into her office. Dr. Marisol Chen was both the medical director and compliance lead at St. Catherine's. She was short, precise, and had the terrifying calm of a woman who could remove a surgeon from a room using only policy language. She slid a printed complaint across the desk. Malcolm's wife claimed I had provided unauthorized medical treatment at a charity event, embarrassed her husband publicly, discussed his diabetic episode with guests, and represented myself as acting on behalf of St. Catherine's. My hands went cold. I didn't do that. I know you, Dr. Chen said, but I need evidence. There were cameras. Then we'll request footage. I looked at the complaint again. The wording was too polished, too structured, too legal. Malcolm's wife was a donor's wife, not a compliance officer. Someone helped her write this, I said. Dr. Chen watched me carefully. Do you know who? I can guess. Her voice softened. Until we complete the review, I have to place you on administrative leave. I nodded like my whole chest had not just cracked. I walked out holding a folder and my hospital badge. In the parking garage, I got into my car and closed the door. For a full minute, I did nothing. Then I unclipped my badge from my jacket. Evelyn Hart, RN. My photo stared back at me. I thought of every night I had worked through exhaustion, every hand I had held, every doctor I had corrected before a dosage mistake, every family I had walked into a quiet room, every patient who had begged me not to leave, and now one complaint, one edited story, one man's wounded pride, could make all of that feel fragile. I pressed the badge between both hands, and, for the first time in years, wanted to put everything back in the box. The medal, the service, The truth. All of it. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe silence had protected me after all. Maybe being seen only gave people better aim. My phone rang. Lena Morris. My charge nurse. My friend. My human emergency brake. I answered without speaking. "What happened?" she asked. "I'm suspended." A pause. "Where are you?" "Garage." "Are you crying?" "No." "Are you lying?" "Yes." "Good. Stay there." "I'm fine." "Evie, I have watched you tell a man with a nail through his hand to breathe slower while you were bleeding through your own sock. You are not fine. Stay there." 15 minutes later, Lena opened my passenger door and got in with 2 coffees. She handed me one. "I don't want coffee," I said. "I know, it's hot chocolate." That broke me. Not the suspension, not the complaint. Hot chocolate. I cried so hard I could not see the steering wheel. Lena sat beside me without touching me. After a while she said, "Do you want to quit?" "Yes." "Do you want to hide?" "Yes." "Do you want me to let you?" I wiped my face. "No." "Good. Because I was going to be annoying." I let out a broken laugh. She pointed at my badge. "That is not a decoration. That is evidence of who you are when nobody is clapping. Don't hand it to them." That night, I opened the cedar box again. Inside were documents I had gathered years earlier, on the advice of a Navy legal officer, who once told me, "Hart, someday a loud idiot will confuse your silence for weakness. Future you will appreciate present you making copies. Public award citation. Discharge papers. Redacted duty summaries. Letters of recommendation. A photo of my surgical team, and the miniature Silver Star ribbon." I almost put the ribbon back. Then Sophie appeared at my bedroom door with her phone in one hand. "Mom?" Kids at school had already seen the clip. "Did you really upstage Uncle Troy?" "No." "Did you fake anything?" "No." "I know." She stepped into the room. "Then why do people keep asking like maybe if they ask enough times, you'll become wrong?" That sentence hurt more than the suspension. I had not only taught my family to underestimate me, I had taught my daughter to watch me endure it. "I'm going to fix this," I said. Sophie looked at the box. "Good. And don't put that away." The investigation did not unfold like a movie. It was slower and uglier than that. A few pieces arrived one by one, each small enough for Troy and Violet to explain away, but together impossible to ignore. The catering company had a service hallway camera the hotel had forgotten about. It showed Violet handling the expired glucose tablets before I ever arrived, taking a photo, then putting them back. It also showed me replacing the supplies and treating Malcolm behind the partition, away from the ballroom. Then Malcolm called Dr. Chen and admitted his wife had not written the hospital complaint herself. Violet had sent her a draft. The draft matched the complaint almost word for word. After that, Violet sent a donor email suggesting my military record was unclear and attaching a screenshot that made it look like my hospital login had accessed medication records. Dr. Chen recognized the screen immediately. It came from a training system used during hospital tours, not the real medication system. Violet had been on one of those tours 2 months earlier. That was enough. Not enough to explain every step. Enough to show what mattered. Violet was not confused. She was building a story. Dr. Chen reinstated me quietly, but she warned me, "Evie, this may not stop." "I know. Then you need someone inside Trident House who understands numbers." That was when Annika Shaw entered the story properly. Annika was the board treasurer, a forensic accountant, and the only person in the organization who could make a spreadsheet sound like a weapon. She had joined Trident House 6 months earlier because she believed in the mission, not Troy's speeches. I sent her everything. She called me 20 minutes later. "They are not improvising," she said. "No." "Good. Improvisers are messy. Planners leave patterns." By then, Beth had stopped calling me, but she had not stopped watching. I learned that later. The first crack came on a Tuesday night. Beth told me afterward that Troy had been in their kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, voice low. "No," he said. "Don't send that invoice again. Use the other description." Beth had stopped in the hallway with a laundry basket against her hip. She did not mean to listen. Then she heard Violet's name. Her hand tightened around the basket. Her first thought was not, "He is lying." Her first thought was, "Don't make him angry." That was when she realized fear had become part of her marriage. Troy turned and saw her. His face changed immediately. Everything okay? Beth asked. Foundation mess, he said. Violet is cleaning up after Evie's drama. Evie's drama? He sighed like a tired husband. Beth, your sister has always wanted attention. She finally found a way to get it. Beth said nothing. But for the first time, the sentence did not land where Troy wanted it to. Later that night, she opened the Trident House expense folder on the shared laptop. She was not looking for crime. She was looking to reassure herself. She found a payment to Carr Strategic Wellness. Then another. Then another. When she asked Troy about it the next morning, he smiled and kissed her forehead. That's Violet's consulting company. We use it for messaging overflow. You never told me. You don't need every operational detail, babe. I approved one of these? You approve what I tell you to approve. That's how teamwork works. He laughed softly after saying it, as if it were nothing. Beth looked down at the invoice. But this one is dated when I was with Mom at her appointment. For half a second, Troy's hand came down flat on the kitchen table. Not hard enough to break anything. Hard enough to make Beth stop breathing. Then his voice dropped cold. Do not start auditing me like I'm one of your sister's patients. Beth froze. Troy held her eyes. Then, just as quickly, he smiled again and touched her cheek. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm under pressure. Evie is trying to turn everyone against us. Beth nodded, because nodding was safer than arguing. But she remembered the sound of his palm on the table, and she remembered how fast his smile came back. The Trident House board called an emergency meeting after Malcolm forwarded Violet's complaint draft. The board was small. Troy, Beth, Violet, Malcolm, Anika, and 2 community members who mostly followed Troy's lead. Anika invited me for the portion involving the complaint. Troy objected. Anika overruled him. The meeting was held in a conference room at Trident House. No cameras, no stage. That alone made Troy look smaller. He still sat at the head of the table. Beth sat beside him, hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. Violet sat across from me with a notebook open, calm and composed. Anika opened the meeting. We are here to discuss donor communications, the complaint against Mrs. Hart, and whether Trident House funds require review. Troy smiled. Agreed. Which is why we need to address Evelyn's interference. My interference, I said, was being falsely accused. Violet looked at me. Concerns were raised. By you. I helped people put their experiences into words. Words you chose. Anika slid copies of the draft complaint across the table. Then explain why your draft became a hospital complaint. For the first time, Violet's face moved. Only a flicker. Then gone. Malcolm's wife was distressed, she said. I assisted her. Malcolm leaned forward. You used my medical episode. I protected your privacy. You emailed my private health situation to donors. Silence. Troy cut in. Let's not attack Violet for doing her job. Her job is communications, Anika said, not drafting hospital complaints against volunteers. Troy's jaw tightened. Evelyn has had issues with me for years. I laughed once. Everyone looked at me. Sorry, I said. It's strange hearing someone describe being insulted as an issue I had with him. Beth looked down. Anika moved to the screenshot. The medication claim also has problems. Dr. Chen confirmed that the image came from a training interface, not the active medication system. Violet had access to that type of screen during a Trident House hospital tour. Violet folded her hands. That does not prove I created it. No, Anika said. It proves this board has enough reason to audit both communications and finances. Troy looked sharply at Violet. That was interesting. For the first time, I wondered whether he knew every detail of what she had done. That made him more human, not innocent. He had wanted me discredited. Violet had found the method. The meeting ended with Anika demanding a limited audit before the grant committee received any final materials. Troy resisted. It will look like we have something to hide. Anika looked at him. Do we? Beth looked at Troy then. Not lovingly, not fearfully, carefully. It was the first time I saw her study her husband as if he were evidence. 3 nights later, Beth called me from a motel bathroom. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Evie. I sat up in bed. Beth, where are you? Red Maple Inn, room 214. Are you safe? I think so. What happened? I found more payments. To whom? A silence. Then, Violet. The room around me seemed to narrow. Beth continued. There's an LLC, Carr Strategic Wellness. Trident House paid it almost $90,000. Consulting, outreach, donor engagement. Some invoices are duplicated. Some were approved with my login. Did you approve them? No. Are you sure? Yes. Beth, listen to me. Do not confront Troy. I already did. I closed my eyes. What did he say? He said I didn't understand cash flow. Then he said if I made this public, people would think I helped steal from veterans. Her voice dropped even lower. And Evie, when he said it, he wasn't yelling. That was worse. He was calm, like he had already decided what he would do to me if I didn't obey. I was already getting dressed. Send me your room number again. Stay there. Evie. Beth. Stay there. I called Lena on the way. I need you. For medical, legal, or emotional damage. Yes. On my way. Beth looked smaller when she opened the motel room door. Not younger. Smaller. Like marriage had folded her badly and left creases. On the bed were printed invoices, a laptop, and Troy's old tablet. I didn't know what else to take, she said. You did enough. At my kitchen table, she showed us the payments. Car strategic wellness, monthly retainers, emergency messaging, donor recovery, crisis positioning. Some invoices matched real work. Others were nonsense. One invoice for veteran outreach narrative consulting was dated the same weekend Troy and Violet had supposedly attended a donor event in Denver. There had been no donor event. Beth looked at the table like it might accuse her. I signed some things when Troy told me to. I thought they were normal expenses. Lena, standing behind her with coffee, said, "A lot of women have trusted the wrong man with a clipboard." Beth laughed once and then cried. Not performative. Not pretty. Just broken. I let him call you just a nurse, she whispered. We are not doing that part tonight. I need to. No. Tonight we preserve evidence. Guilt can wait until morning. Then she remembered the audio. I recorded him. Anika arrived 20 minutes later because Beth called her from my kitchen and told her she was ready to cooperate. We listened together. Troy's voice filled the room. You approved what I told you to approve, Beth. That's how this works. Beth's recorded voice shook. I didn't know Car Strategic was Violet. You didn't need to know. You used my login. I used access already available to the foundation. That's fraud, Troy. He laughed. No, sweetheart. Fraud is what it becomes if you try to explain it without me. Beth covered her mouth as the recording continued. His voice softened. That was the part that frightened me most. Not the anger, the tenderness. You're not built for this, Beth. You plan flowers. You write thank you cards. Let me handle the hard things. I watched my sister fold over herself, because there it was again. The same structure. Different words. Troy had made me small by calling me just a nurse. He had made Beth small by calling her too delicate for truth. Anika stopped the recording. This changes everything. Beth whispered. Am I in trouble? You may have exposure if you signed approvals without reading them, Anika said. But you also have evidence of unauthorized use and coercion. The sooner you disclose, the better. Beth looked at me. Do you hate me? I did not answer quickly. That was the most honest mercy I could offer. Finally, I said, I hate what you allowed. I don't hate you, she cried again. This time, I took her hand. The climax came 3 nights later. Troy announced a live stream titled, The Truth About Trident House. Anika advised all of us not to engage publicly. Let him talk, she said. A man trying to save his image will usually reveal what he worships. We watched from my living room. Me, Beth, Lena, Sophie, Mom, and Anika on speakerphone. Troy sat at his office desk with the American flag behind him. Violet sat beside him, eyes red, hands folded in her lap. Tears are not evidence, Troy began with a long breath. I built Trident House because veterans deserve better than politics, gossip, and personal vendettas. The comments started moving fast. Finally, someone is saying it. Poor Troy. He looks exhausted. I knew the nurse story was suspicious. This is what happens when family jealousy gets involved. Troy looked at the screen, as if the support pained him. I did not want to speak publicly, he said, but silence has allowed a false story to grow. Violet lowered her eyes beside him. My sister-in-law, Evelyn Hart, served this country. I have never denied that. But service does not give anyone the right to destroy a mission because they feel overlooked. More comments. Exactly. She made the gala about herself. Didn't she get suspended from the hospital? This nurse destroyed a charity? Sophie stiffened beside me. I put one hand over hers. Violet looked into the camera. I have been afraid to speak because I know how powerful certain people can be when they want to intimidate women behind the scenes. Lena said, I'm going to bite my own hand. Troy lowered his eyes. And the hardest part is this. Some of the financial questions being raised were approved by my wife, Beth. The comment feed exploded. Beth approved it? Wow. So his wife did it. He was protecting her? Poor guy. Beth stopped breathing. On screen, Troy's voice turned sorrowful. I have tried to protect her, but I can't let innocent veterans suffer because of paperwork she didn't understand. My mother whispered, Oh, Beth. Beth stood up. He's doing it. Anika's voice came through the phone, sharp and controlled. Beth, do not post. Send me permission to release the recording to the board and grant counsel. Beth's hands shook as she typed. I give permission. While Troy was still speaking, Anika sent the audio to the board and the county grant council. For 22 minutes, Troy kept winning. That was the worst part. People believed him because he sounded wounded. They believed him because Violet looked fragile. They believed him because Beth was not there to defend herself. Then the comments began changing. Anika Shah posted from her verified account. Troy, the board has received audio evidence contradicting your statement. End this live stream immediately. Troy saw it. For 1 second, the camera caught his real face. Not rage, fear. Violet leaned toward him and whispered, but the microphone caught enough. Troy, stop. He kept smiling. I see the board is watching. Good. Transparency matters. Then Malcolm commented. You used my medical emergency, and your communications director wrote the complaint against the nurse who helped me. The comments shifted violently. Wait, what? The donor is here? Is that Malcolm Pierce? What complaint? Then Captain Mercer appeared. Public claims that Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Hart exaggerated her service are false. I have provided a statement to council. Troy's mouth opened slightly. Someone wrote, Lieutenant Commander? Another wrote, so he called her just a nurse and she outranked his story? Violet looked down at her phone. Troy tried to keep going. There are people here with agendas. Anika commented again. End the live stream now. For 3 seconds, he did not move. Then the screen went black. Nobody in my living room spoke. Sophie whispered, Did we win? Anika answered through the speaker. No, sweetheart. We documented. My phone rang less than 5 minutes later. Troy. Everyone in the room saw the name on the screen. Beth's face went white. Don't answer. I looked at her, and for the first time, I understood that she was not protecting me from an argument. She was reacting like someone who knew exactly how his voice could change when no one else was watching. I answered and put it on speaker. For 3 seconds, there was only breathing. Then Troy said, You think this makes you a hero? His voice was different now. No stage, no velvet, no wounded leader. Just a man whose mirror had cracked. No, I said. It makes me done being quiet. He laughed once. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. You think Beth is safe because she ran to you? She approved those payments. She signed documents. If I go down, she goes down too. Beth closed her eyes. I looked at my sister, then at my daughter, then at my mother. And I realized I was not afraid of him anymore. Troy, I said, you already put her there. She climbed out. His breathing sharpened. You're going to destroy your own family over pride? No, I said. I'm going to stop letting you use family as a place to hide. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his voice dropped. You should have stayed just a nurse. Lena's eyes went murderous. I almost smiled. I was never just a nurse. Then I ended the call. No shouting, no speech. Just one quiet click. And for the first time since the gala, the silence in the room belonged to me. The rest did not happen in one glorious courtroom scene. It happened the way consequences usually happen. Slowly, through numbers, emails, signatures, and people finally refusing to look away. The audit showed Carr's Strategic Wellness had received $92,400 over 18 months. Some invoices were duplicated. Several were approved under Beth's login while she was documented elsewhere. Restricted donor funds had been shifted into vague outreach accounts before being paid to Violet's company. Troy had not stolen millions. That almost made him more believable. He had taken a little, explained a little, moved a little, lied a little, and then needed bigger lies to protect the smaller ones. Violet had drafted the complaint, sent the donor emails, used the training screen screenshot to imply medication misconduct, and framed every question as concern. Troy had wanted me discredited. Violet made it efficient. Within a month, Troy resigned from Trident House. The board removed him anyway. Violet resigned 2 days later, citing personal wellness. The grant was paused, then reconsidered under Annika's leadership. Beth filed for separation and moved into a small apartment near the community college. None of it felt like victory. It felt like noise finally stopping. The moment that stayed with me came later, at my mother's kitchen table. She brought out an old shoebox and set it in front of me without a speech. "I should have shown you this years ago," she said. Inside was a photograph of me at 26 in uniform, squinting against desert sun. Beneath it was a folded copy of a local article about my award, printed from the internet years earlier. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were 6 words. Evie never needed to be loud. I sat at the table for a long time. Dad had died before Sophie turned 6. He had been a mechanic, a quiet man with scarred hands and very little interest in applause. I had spent years thinking he did not ask about my service because he did not understand it. Now I realized he had understood enough. He had kept the proof. He had simply respected my silence so completely that I mistook it for absence. Mom touched the edge of the photo. "Your father knew you were brave." I swallowed hard. Why didn't he say more? Maybe he thought you already knew. I laughed once, badly. That was optimistic. She smiled through tears. He was like that. Later, Beth came over with store-bought pie and a face full of shame. She did not ask me to erase what had happened. That mattered. "I laughed," she said before she even sat down. "Yes. I let him call you just a nurse. Yes. I think part of me liked it. That surprised me." She looked at the floor. "Because if you were ordinary, then I could be the special one." The room went quiet. That was the first apology that mattered. Not because it was pretty, but because it cost her something. I said, "I let you believe it, because it was easier than telling you who I really was." Beth shook her head. "That doesn't make us equal." "No," I said, "but it makes us honest," she cried. I did not comfort her immediately. Then I passed her a napkin. That was enough. I still work at St. Catherine's. I still wear scrubs more than medals. I still answer to nurse with pride, because nursing was never small. Nurses see people when their bodies betray them, when their families panic, when their dignity is on the floor with their clothes, and we do not look away. There is nothing just about that. Sometimes patients notice the small silver ribbon on my badge reel, not hidden anymore. Not displayed like a trophy either. Just there. Some ask what it is. Some do not. Privacy is still allowed. But hiding is different. When they ask, I say, "It's from my Navy days." And if they ask, "Were you a nurse?" I look them in the eye. "Yes," I say. And that was never a small thing. Because the truth does not need to shout, but it does need to be spoken before the liars learn to speak for you. So let me ask you this. If you were in my place, could you forgive Beth for laughing along all those years? Or would that wound be too deep? Tell me in the comments. I read them,